Hi, I'm Masto, and welcome back to Astonished Animations, the food series. Today we'll be making meron pan. It is a kind of Japanese sweet bun, and if you translate the name to English, it means melon bun. But don't be fooled by the name because there is no melon inside the bread. It's probably named that way because of how it looks like. This melon bun is a kind of sweet bun with a crispy, sweet layer of cookie dough on top, and they're really tasty. You can probably find them all over Japan, from convenience stores to bakeries. They are everywhere. And now let's make this sweet meron pan together in Blender. Alright, so now we are in Blender. I'm using Blender 4.5. So the first thing we want to do is to make sure, just to make our lives easier, to go ahead to add-ons and make sure Node Wrangler is turned on. It's going to make things so much easier. And then we are going to go to the scene properties, make sure you're using Eevee. And then in color management, make sure you choose standard instead of like Filmic or AGX. How do you even say that? But I don't know. But make sure you choose standard. So whatever colors you choose in the shader is going to be exactly the same in the render. So first thing I'm going to do, we are going to delete everything. Maybe leave the camera because we can use it later. And then let's add Shift A and then go to Mesh and UV Sphere. So for a UV sphere, we want to lower the segments to around 8 by 8. That's how I made it. So now we can go into edit mode. So tab, go into edit mode, and then make sure you turn on proportional editing. You can click it here or you can click O to turn it on and off. So now it's on. And then I'm going to use vertex selection and then click the bottom vertex. I'm going to go to front view and then I'm going to G, Z, and use your mouse scroll wheel to control the fall off. Just kind of squash it until it's kind of like a little bun around the shape of the meron pan. We can right click and shade smooth. Okay, so now it's smooth. And then what I'm going to do is to select some of these top faces. I guess I'm going to select from here, and then we can alt click onto the edge loop to select the entire edge loop. So alt click and then hold down Shift, alt click again, and then these faces we can just hit C to use this circular selection and paint them in. So now we are selecting all these faces at the top. So what I'm gonna do is Shift D and then just right click to confirm it without moving it. And then we can scale this up for a little bit, so as make sure in proportional editing you hit connected only. So now we are only editing these faces. So now we can enlarge this top part of our meron pan for a little bit. Meron pan. Sometimes I just don't know how to pronounce those words. But now we have this face slightly bigger than the bottom part. And that's great. And then what I'm going to do is to go to edge selection. And then alt click on this edge to select the entire edge. E, S to extrude and scale down that new edge. Just to bring it in for a little bit, just like this. And then I'm going to hit G just to, I'm going to lower the fall off, so I'm only pretty much moving that edge itself. I can actually turn off proportional editing, but I'm just lazy. Bring that edge down so it's kind of like that. And we will fix the shape later on, but for now this is our basic shape. And it might be a little bit too low poly for some of you, so it is okay. Optional. to come here and go to modifiers, generate, and subsurf, and then just make sure it's 1. 1 is pretty much enough because if you go 2, that's quite a lot of mesh over there, so reduce it. Okay. What I'm going to do is to hit L on this top part of the mesh. You can temporarily turn off subdivision and just select this top part. If you put your mouse over this part and hit L, it will select everything that's connected. But if you have seams or something like that, it works a little bit differently. But if it's normal mode, then you're just selecting the entire connected, all the connected faces. So L, select that part, and then U, and then we can go ahead and try and unwrap this with minimum stretch. So let's go to UV editing and see how it looks. It looks like this. It's good enough. It's just what we need. Okay, we just need a nice UV right here so we can work on our shaders later without all those stretching and all that for the textures. So now we can add in 2 separate materials. So now I'm going to add 1 material, and then I'm going to call it top. And by default, when you assign a first material, the entire object is applied with this material. So I'm going to add 1 more material called bottom. Alright. I'm going to edit mode and then place your mouse onto the bottom part and hit L and assign this part to the bottom material. So now, because by default everything is the first material, so now this part is top and this part is bottom. So let's jump into the shading tab, and right here we can start with perhaps a bottom material, and then before that let's make sure we are choosing the rendered viewport shading. I'm going to add a light that is going to be perhaps a sun would work well depending on your scene. Usually you want to fine-tune all the lighting and materials based on your scene, and sometimes you want to control the lighting individually for each object for procedural or anime style, because it is harder to get everything look coherent if you're just using one light source. So sometimes we would separate light source for each object, but right here I'm just going to use a sun. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is to Shift A in the bottom material, Shift A, and go ahead and grab the input and then texture coordinate. And what we need is the generated coordinates right here. And we will have the coordinates of the objects XYZ, which is pretty handy because we can use it as a gradient if we hit Shift A and then converter, separate XYZ. We can directly get the Z-axis and we can just have this really nice gradient, right? So Shift A, converter, and then color ramp. And then we can use this color ramp to control the colors of this really nice looking gradient. So we can delete this BSDF for now. So hit X, delete it, Control Shift, and make sure you connect this directly to the output. And then now we can choose some colors for this for now. I'm going to choose a really light yellow. We'll fine tune the colors later because sometimes you gotta tune the colors when it's like near the end. Can't quite see the effect until everything comes together. So let me just choose some colors like this, and then I'm going to perhaps bring this lighter color in, and then I'm going to choose this darker color over here. Control C. I'm gonna put my mouse on top of this color and Control C. This way you can actually copy the color directly without all the codes and stuff. So I'm gonna hit plus and bring this new point over here on this side, and I'm gonna Control V on this field. Then I'm just gonna bring this in. So right now we have this little like ambient occlusion thing going on over here. Maybe the shading is not as smooth right now, so let me just turn back on the subdivision for now. So now it looks like this. We can tweak the shapes later, just like I said. So maybe I want this color to be slightly lighter over here. All right. And then maybe this one can be a little bit more orangey, like this, or towards the red side. But roughly this color is going to be fine. So this is our bottom shader for now. We can add those cell shading later. So right now, let's go to the top material. And then I'm going to delete the principled and we'll add stuff back later. So as you can see on most melon pans, you can see these cross patterns on top. So we are going to create that for now using some procedural textures. So I'm going to hit Shift A. And what I'm going to do is to go to texture. And we can use a brick texture actually in this case because it is pretty handy in terms of the effect we're trying to create. Now it looks nothing like the cross pattern, but we can tweak this by going to the colors. I'm just going to put the color 1 as white, also the color 2 as white, and then I'm going to decrease the offset so it's just 0. Now we have these cross patterns, and then I'm going to scale this up. Scale this down, perhaps. So now it looks like this. But sometimes when we use some default texture coordinates, it's gonna look a little bit weird on the edges over here. Sometimes there are some distortions because of how the mesh is shaped. So what I'm gonna do is to Shift A. I'm gonna bring that texture coordinate in. And since we unwrap this model, we can use the UV as a vector. It is just slightly less stretchy in this case. And what we can do is to adjust these settings over here. For example, we can adjust the mortar size. What's this even called? But we can adjust the size of this, thickness of the in-betweens like this. And I'm going to also adjust the row height perhaps. Just brings everything together. You know, just adjust the sizes of everything for a little bit. The row height and brick width kind of works closely. It kind of works the same. So I'm going to keep it around like this. So right now, as you can see, the lines are really like regular and they don't look like it's something that you can see on a bread, on a bun. So let's add a little bit of, let's make it a little bit more irregular. So what I'm going to do, there's a little trick that I use sometimes, that is Shift A, texture, Voronoi, texture. Put it between the texture coordinate and brick texture. And then I'm going to put the position into the vector. So I can actually show you how this works, because if you Control Shift and click until it connects to the position, you can see this kind of looks like a coordinate, right? If you let me grab a plane and apply the material, you can see it kind of looks like a coordinate, right? Kind of looks like the UVs, right? So we can kind of use this as a way to scramble the coordinates for a little bit. So when we plug the position into the vector, we can use it like a scramble. We can increase the scale by a lot until you kind of see the cross patterns again. So now it looks a little bit more irregular, right? Because of the Voronoi. I like to keep the detail low and the roughness kind of low, because if you increase the detail, it kind of gets a little bit more smooth again. So keep the detail low and control the size so it's kind of roughly how you want it to look like. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is to add another what I'm gonna do here is to add another cross pattern under these black crosses, just to add like a little transition between the white and the black. So I'm gonna bring these nodes together. Okay, G, bring them together, and then select them all, Shift A, and then I have another set. Now this set, I want it to be perhaps gray. Somewhere in a gray area. Just not the same as the black lines over here. And then I'm going to Control Shift right click on the bottom, brick texture, drag it to the top so we can mix them together easily, just like that. And then I'm going to change this to multiply, turn it all the way up, and then we can adjust the mortar size. Okay, I don't know how to say that, but let's expand this for a little bit because it's right under the other line and everything else is the same. We're just changing the size of the lines, the thickness. So it's just right under. We can add a little bit of like a gray color in the middle. So now we have these little cross patterns right here, which is very nice. We can select all these nodes and Shift P to put them into a new frame. And I can come over here to the properties and go ahead and name this. In the label, call it cross. Or cross pattern, anything that you want. If you want, you can give it a color just like this. Like this. Now, what we can work on is to add like a base gradient to this cross pattern. So what I can do is to Shift A, converter color ramp, put it after the multiply, and now we can use this multiply to kind of control the colors. So what I want it to look like, maybe the black is a little bit brownish. Somewhere around here, like a yellowish, light orange yellow color. And the white, I'm gonna change it to like a brighter yellow, just like that. Maybe this is a little bit too dull, so I can add a little bit more saturation in it. Bring up the lightness. Somewhere in between. Let me just adjust the color until it kind of looks nice. I think this looks nice right now. But let me go ahead and adjust the size of the cross for a little bit. So I can click on one of these, Control Shift, left click on one of these nodes, brick texture nodes, and let me just kind of adjust the size for a little bit more so it doesn't look too weird on the edges. Just like this. Maybe we can move around some of the textures as well. So what I can do is to Shift A and then vector and then mapping. I'm going to put one between the texture coordinate and a Voronoi texture and just move this around because I don't like those like rounded parts. Kind of looks a little bit weird. And then we can also go to the UV editing over here and we can select the top part. Go ahead and select the top faces. And we can kind of adjust how things look over here as well. Because it might look a little bit distorted in some places near the edges. But this looks okay right now. So let me connect this the same mapping node. I can Shift D, just put it to the bottom, and then I can change the scale. I can copy the scale of the top one and paste it to the bottom one. Just hover your mouse over the field, Control C and Control V over here. So this kind of looks like what I want right now, but we can still add a little bit more detail and make it a little bit more irregular. But right now, let me go ahead into the bottom shader. And then we can copy the set of nodes to get a gradient as well. So let me actually want to fine tune this a little bit as well. And then we can copy these nodes, copy, Control C. Make sure your mouse is in this shader editor, Control C, go back to the top, Control V. Now we have this. All right, so what we want to do is we can mix these two colors together. So this is a gradient. We can remove the top and just bring it like this. So this is like a normal gradient. We can also choose colors like this. A little orangey color near the bottom. And then near the connection over here, we can have like a little bit of like ambient occlusion, right? But now we have a gradient and we kind of want to mix it with the cross. So what we really need are the colors of the cross and perhaps those spaces, these diamond shapes in between. We can use it, we can fill it in with this gradient texture. But let me just demonstrate how I'm going to do this. So what I'm going to do is to bring in a Shift A converter mix. No, I mean color mix color, because there are two mix nodes. Sometimes I get them mixed up, but right now we have this. What I want to do is to plug this gradient. Let me just select these nodes and name it really quick. Gradient. Let me just grip this together. And then what I'm going to do is to make sure we connect this to the bottom. And then we can connect this to the top. But right now it kind of looks just a mix between the two. But I want the diamond shapes in between to be filled with more of this base gradient. So what I'm going to do is to actually use this black and white cross texture that we have here as the factor. And I'm going to plug this directly into the factor. And you can see as I Control Shift, left click onto this mix, we can see kind of the cross itself keeps the color of the upper gradient of the upper part over here, but the spaces in between, the diamond shapes, are going to be following the base gradient. And looks pretty nice over here for now. I think it's a little bit too yellow, so what I'm going to do is to go to the base gradient. I mean, a little bit too orangey, so let me bring it back for a little bit. And I'm just going to tweak the colors for a little bit. So right now we have our shader looks like this, right? And let me explain what is actually going on over here with the factor. So when we have this mix color node or any form of mix node, the factor controls how much we mix between these two inputs, right? So when it's totally 0 and the equivalent to the number 0 to the value of 0 is a color black. And when it's 0, it takes all the A input as the output. But if we turn it to 1, then it's all towards B. And the value of 1 is equivalent to the color of white. So if we plug something that is grayscale, what is absolutely black will be outputting the color from A. And what is completely white is going to outputting the color of B. But everything in between is a mix between A and B. If it's gray, then it's definitely a mix between A and B. So I hope you guys understand how the mix nodes work from here. So right here, we can add a little bit more detail towards this top texture. So I'm going to come over here and add a noise texture. Noise texture. And then I'm going to Control Shift right click the noise texture onto the multiply. And I don't know why the node went over there, so let me bring this back, because this will give us a mix node, mixing these two as inputs. And now what I want to do is to Control T the nodes keeps going over there. But Control T will give us the texture coordinate and mapping directly plug into the vector if we select the noise texture. So when it's generated, let me bump up the scale. You can see a little bit of distortion towards the sides because it's kind of rounded, right? So I want to use the object instead, so it's a little bit more regular. But let us see how it looks like, because right now we have a noise texture in between, so it kind of modifies how the cross pattern looks right now. So now it looks like this. This is the output of the cross pattern colors. So now it kind of looks like this. It has some noise in between. But if we just look at the grayscale over here, kind of looks like this, right? And we can also add a Shift A converter color ramp and put it after the noise texture. And just kind of modify the contrast a little bit. So you are actually free to tweak these color ramps and play with the mix nodes for a little bit. You can choose different color modes. Right now I chose multiply, but you can also use mix. It kind of works in a similar fashion. It also kind of looks similar. So what I'm gonna do right now is to make this shape a little bit more irregular. So what we can do is to go to the modifiers, and then what we can do is to add a deform displace. And then we're gonna hit new in the texture over here, go down to the texture tab, go to the type, select clouds. And now we can come back here to the displace and just control the strength for a little bit, so it's just very minimal kind of distortion or displacement on our melon pan. So now it looks a little bit more irregular. It's kind of closer to what it would look like to real melon pan. But of course, this is kind of low poly. It is better to have this shape following exactly the cross pattern. But right here, we're just kind of making like a simple version of it while learning how to use some of these modifiers and nodes. So right here, we have this slightly displaced model. What we can do is to actually come back here and go into edit mode, right? We can select the top vertices over here and just use proportional editing. You can hit O again. Make sure it's connected only. We can just move these vertices around for a little bit, so we can drag things down. You are free to play around with the vertices and just kind of see how it looks. So right now it looks like this. So now after moving around the vertices and also the displace modifier, it looks a little bit more irregular, which, you know, if it's just a prop from far away, it looks pretty nice already. Okay, so now it looks pretty nice, but we want it to be affected by lighting. So what we want to do is to use a set of cell shading nodes. And cell shading nodes, if you are into NPR, anime styles, you will know how to make this in Blender Eevee. So let me run this through. Shift A, let's grab a shader. We can use principled or something like diffuse also works. Control Shift left click on this so we can take a look at it. Now we can increase the roughness because the bread is rough. Then Shift A, go to converter, shader to RGB right here. Now it goes from a shader output to color output. And then we can control it, converter, color ramp. We can control the colors like this. So now what we can do is to change the linear to constant. So now we have this anime-like shader, right? Shading. You can also use linear, but you can kind of tweak these to make like a slight gradient between the white and the black. Let me bring it closer. I'm so used to things being so far away in the viewport. But you can either choose a constant to make it completely just two colors, but you can also use linear to bring a little bit of realism. Like sometimes even though you're making anime style stuff, you also want a little bit of realism. A good mix between the two. It depends on the style you're going for. But enough talking. This is how it looks like right now. We can bring these nodes together. Let me kind of select these nodes first and then Shift P, group them together, call it cell shading. All right, give it color, random color. Okay, so we can mix the base gradient and the cell shading together. So Control Shift right click onto the top. So now we can multiply the cell shading gradient. Oh my god, click something wrong. Onto the top. So let me change this to multiply and then drag it all the way to 1. This way we can multiply the colors onto the top. And we can choose a color for this melon pan that we have. So choose something between yellow and orange. We can play around with the brightness for a little bit. It depends on the style you're going for as well, because in some of the games they use very light shadows like this, you know. But if you're going for more realism, you can choose another color. But I'm gonna choose somewhere over here. Okay. Right, let me copy this cell shading group of nodes onto the top as well. So now Control V, because I just copy those nodes, and then we can mix these colors together. Multiply this on top as well. Control Shift right click, drag again. Same thing. Go back to multiply, drag it all the way to 1. Like some people like to tweak the color, or some people like to tweak, you know, the factor, but I prefer to do it directly in the colors. Okay, so right now it looks like this. It has some form of shading, which is really nice. We can bring it closer together perhaps. So I realize my Live 2D model might have been in the way for some of the parts on the right over here. Apologize for that. I hope you guys can still follow what I'm doing on the screen. Right now, I want the shading to be a little bit more rough because it is not supposed to be this smooth, right? It's irregular on the top especially. So what I want to do is to just add a little bit of roughness to the shading. Of course, this is kind of stylized. It's not exactly realistic, but we can still add a little bit of roughness just to make it look a little bit more natural. So texture, I'm going to add a texture, noise texture over here. Control Shift left click. This is how it looks like right now. Control T onto this noise texture to get these mapping nodes. And I'm going to use the object again because less stretching, right? So I'm going to plug this noise texture into the the normal of the diffuse BSDF to make the shading a little bit more rough. So Shift A, vector, bump. So I'm going to plug this noise texture into the height, not the normal, of course. Remember, be careful, don't plug it into the normal, and the normal into the normal of the diffuse BSDF. And if we take a look at the shading right now, it looks like this. I also want to make sure the diffuse BSDF color is white because it also affects how the shading looks like. So right now it's not so strong. We have a little bit of roughness. If you want to, you can control the value over here. If you click on the arrow, sometimes it's just too much. So you can just type in maybe 0.03. Let's try 0.01. Okay. A little bit of roughness over here. And let's see how it looks like in the final product. I think it's a little bit too strong. Let me tone it back down to 0.05 and see if it looks better. And play with the noise texture a little bit so it doesn't look way too detailed or way too rough. I just want a little bit of roughness on the edges. And We can also make the shadow follow the cross pattern as well. So what I can do is to come over here to the cross pattern, and everything up till this point we can copy it and use it as a bump. So we have two sets of brick textures, right? And then including this multiply, we can copy them all basically. So let's select all of them over here, Control C. And let me Control V at the bottom over here. So now we have the nodes. Okay, let me expand this to make sure you can see it, because sometimes I just zoom out way too much. Apologize for that as well. But now we can mix the noise texture and the cross patterns together. So right now it looks like this and this. We can Control Shift right click. This is a function of node wrangler, remember. So mix them together. And then we can set it to multiply, turn it up, and let's take a look at this node over here. And if you want to see the effect, we can also take a look at the diffuse BSDF. If I increase this distance, you can start to see the cross patterns a little bit more. But the noise texture, I kind of want it to be less apparent. So I might want to go ahead and add a color ramp between the noise texture and the multiply over here, just to control the strength of the noise texture. You can use a color ramp or a map range node, something like that. So what I can do is to change the black parts to be a little bit less strong by bringing it up towards the gray, and also the white part, so I can bring it down towards gray, so it's not as strong. So right now the cross is a little bit stronger. So we can take a look at the overall look by taking a look at the final output over here. Maybe a little bit too strong still. So I can go ahead and decrease the strength perhaps, and just take a look at how it interacts with the lighting. So right now, let me come down here and all these nodes that we have made, select them all. We can Shift P and call it the bump. Give it a random color. And then now this is the shader of the top part. So we can further tweak the colors for a little bit. Perhaps we can also play with the scale of the cross parent even more, and then make sure to paste that scale value into all the brick textures. Go ahead and paste them all in. So I did a little bit of tweak to the shader. Mainly I just make the cross a little bit smaller, and also I kind of make the cross a little bit thinner, the lines a little bit more thinner, so it's kind of disconnected. As you can see, if I adjust the motor size, and because of the Voronoi texture, it kind of breaks it up a little bit, so it's kind of disconnected in between, and I like this effect. So what I can also do is to just copy all these, go to the bump and copy these noise texture nodes, including a bump node, just these 5 nodes, and Control C, paste it into the bottom, and I'm going to use it as the bump as well, just to make the bottom part kind of have the same level of detail as the upper part. So now the bottom looks like this, which is also pretty nice. So it's really just a matter of tweaking some of the colors. So if you want to add something like outlines, of course, we can actually do that right now really quick. Go to the shading tab. We can first try the inverted hole method for adding outlines first. So what is inverted hole? Let me show you. Go to the materials, and then I'm going to add 2 materials, and I'm going to bring one of these under the top. So each of these materials, existing materials, will have 1 outline material correspondingly. So let me hit new, and then let me call this outline, and I'm gonna make this a emission shader, and also the bottom one will be using the outline. And then let's say we can choose something like a dark brown color as an outline. And then make sure we go to the settings, surface backface culling, and just turn on camera and shadow for the outline material. And now let me go into the modifiers, add a modifier called solidify. And then let me drag the thickness towards the negative side for a little bit like this. All right, let me just bring this in for a little bit because I can't see it. My phone is kind of in the way. So let's go to normals, check flip, and then for materials, change the offset to 1. Okay, let me bring this back. So now we have a little simple outline that we have. If you can't really see it, we can change the background color, but note that the background color will also affect the lighting. So just for rendering purposes, we can do a quick setup with the background color as well. So let's get into the shading. We are learning so much in this video. Okay, so let me go to the shading and change to world. Let me shift the background color over here and shift A input, light path. And then I'm gonna use its camera ray to mix these two, and you know why. Control Shift right click the bottom background node onto the top background node, and then the top background node is going to be the background node that shades the scene, and the bottom one is going to be just the background color. So let me plug its camera ray into the mix shader over here, and we can just change colors. Okay, change to a color that you would like, maybe a little bit of a yellow color. I think a warmer color makes you want to eat the melon pan a little bit more. So let's choose a warmer color just like this. Of course, you can use other methods of adding outlines as well, like Freestyle. So let me go into render. And we have Freestyle over here. And Freestyle basically also offers a way to add outlines. Oh, how about we just do it anyway? We can just do it in all. We can just do it all in this video. So let me turn off the solidify modifier for the inverted hole outlines. And in order for Freestyle to work, of course, we need the camera. So let us hit 0. And let me just camera to view. And then we can bring this in so we can actually see the melon pan. Okay. So now we are going to use Freestyle to add the outlines. So check Freestyle in the scene properties. Okay. And go to the view layer. And then you will find the Freestyle settings in the view layer settings. So now we can go to the scene view layer settings and go to the Freestyle line set settings. We can find a Freestyle thickness. We can add a modifier called a long stroke over here because right now I kind of want to create that hand-drawn outline effect. So we can add a long stroke and change the mapping to curve. And this curve controls how each of your Freestyle stroke is going to look like. It's going to vary the thickness. So if it's at the bottom over here, it's going to be no thickness. And at the top is a maximum thickness, which can be controlled by the values over here. So we can do something like this. So it is thicker at some parts, thinner at some parts. Let's bring it up and down like this. This will do the job, and we can hit F12 to render it once and see how it looks like. So it kind of looks like this right now. The outlines are a little bit too thin, so of course we can go back into the view layer and go to the thickness, come back to this modifier, and just crank up the max value for a little bit to make it a little bit more thicker. So now we can add some variation right here, maybe a little bit more thick. And we can also change the Freestyle color over here. Let's change it to something like a brown. Of course, every time you change these settings, you have to re-render. Maybe we can slightly increase the minimum thickness so it's not completely thin. If you don't want the outlines within the inner parts right here because you can kind of see it over here. What you can do is to come up here to the edge type, and what I'm going to select is only the external contour. So when I render it, it's only the external line that's going to be shown over here. But of course, if you have multiple objects in your scene and some of them you want the inner line, some of them you don't want inner lines, you kind of have to, perhaps you have to composite different multiple layers of renders together. So some of them have lines, some of them don't have the inner lines. So this is something you can explore, but I'm not going to talk so much about it in this video. So now there's something I actually want to change for a little bit. This melon pan still looks a bit unnatural around the edges. So I kind of want to fade out these edges, these cross patterns around the edges for a little bit. So what I can do is right here we have our cross patterns right before it feeds into the color ramp, right here. So these are brick textures and then noise textures and all that. So what I want to do is to use that trick that I use for the base gradient, which is to just grab a texture coordinate, and then I'm going to do converter separate XYZ, and then I'm going to feed the generated into the separate XYZ. So I can just grab a converter color ramp and kind of invert this so it's white near the bottom, and let me try to see if I can make it a little bit more smoother. So maybe I can choose something like ease or B-spline just to bring it, you know, a little bit, make it a little bit smoother so it's kind of white at the bottom. And what we can do right now is we can use this and Control Shift right click onto the mix. Now we can choose this to be add. This way we can fade out the edges for a little bit. So all we are doing is to just add this gradient to kind of fade out the end for a little bit so it kind of connects. So now let's see how it looks. And let me see if there's anything I can still adjust over here. So now looking at it, I kind of want to add a little bit more detail onto the surface still. One way I can do it is to modify the base gradient. So instead of call it base gradient, I can call this part base color. This is the part where it only has like a gradient, right? And then I'm kind of layering the cross pattern on top of that. So I can actually modify this base color for a little bit more. And what I can do is to Shift A, texture, noise texture. And then of course, Control T to bring in those mapping nodes. Let me just bring these a little bit to the side so they don't get in the way, because now we need a little bit more space. So of course, just like how we did it for the other noise textures, I'm going to use the object, and then I'm going to converter color ramp. I was planning to duplicate that, but never mind. Just make a new one. And then we can connect the noise texture to the color ramp. And then what we can do, come over here. We can kind of mix these two together to mix the noise onto the gradient. So Control Shift right click and get ourselves a mix node between the two. So now this is the color of the color ramp of the noise, and then I'm just kind of mixing it just somewhere around 0.5 and 0.4. We just need a little bit of detail over there. We can also add a layer of sugar on top, because for some melon pan they do have sugar at the top. So what I can do is to just take the first 3 nodes until the noise texture and just Shift D again. Bring this away for a little bit. And then this noise texture, we can use it to layer on top of the base gradient and also the noise. So Control Shift right click on the noise texture, onto the last mix node in the base color, we have this, right? But we want to change this to add because we want only the white parts. If you just mix it, you're gonna mix the dark parts in as well. So I want to add it and just turn it all the way up. Right now it looks extremely weird, and it's okay. Let me add a converter color ramp. This just needs to be black and white, to be honest. So we can bring down the black. We can turn the detail and roughness up so we can have a finer noise. And I just want it to be around the top area. So what I can do is to actually use this set of nodes as a gradient again. So the generated and separate XYZ, I want to duplicate it. So Shift D. Hope you guys are following. So this part is going to be used as a gradient to control how much of this sugar is going to be shown. So I'm going to use this gradient, the Z gradient again. And then let me just duplicate this color ramp, Shift D. And I want it to be shown at the top, right? So I only kind of want to select this area, right? And I want to change it to a softer gradient so it's not extra harsh on the edge. And let me plug this gradient into the factor of the last add node. So now if I take a look at the last node, we can see the sugar is only kind of at the top, just like that. Lastly, let me just go ahead into the UV editing, and I'm going to select the top faces. And I can adjust the shape from here, actually, from the UVs. So let me select all the UVs, and I'm going to rotate it for a little bit. And I'm going to squash it on one axis, perhaps the x-axis, so it's a little bit slanted. So now the cross patterns are looking a little bit more like real melon pans because they are more like diamonds and not square, and I kind of want to make them a little bit more narrower so they look more like diamond shapes than squares. This is our final melon pan. And of course, if you want to make it look even closer to a real melon pan, you can model all the parts on the top. But of course, that's going to be a totally different method because I'm just using textures in this model. And if you use actual modeling for the top part, the texture will be a lot different because you don't have to do all the cross patterns and all that. But just by having the texture, this model is looking pretty good already. The good thing about this is it doesn't have a lot of geometry, so it is also perfect for using them as background objects to optimize your scene for a little bit. Of course, procedural textures is not always optimal. Sometimes you want to really hand paint all the textures so they look even more closer to the look you're trying to get. You have more control. But just in case you want to try using procedural methods, do follow this tutorial. I think you can learn quite a lot from the nodes. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video, and let me know if there is any kind of food that you really love that you want to make in Blender. Let me know because I can perhaps make a tutorial on that as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.